Come on. There we go.
Right on. So we have a fairly tight agenda scheduled for tonight. We've scheduled an hour and a half, but hopefully we'll wrap up before then. We'll work our way through each kind of staff member and what they've been working on, and we'll finish up with a Q&A and discussion. If you like, throw your questions as we go into the chat. So we have kind of place markers, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentations. We'll start with some welcome and introductions, go in through the staff reports, and finish with the QA and discussion. I did just kind of want to acknowledge that we've had some kind of changes, new staff, new roles. It's been a really exciting time at Peninsula Streams and Shorelines. I've taken over for Ian Bruce as executive director and been in the role now for a few months and getting our feet underneath us. We have a number of staff who have who's the kid in the left corner, Ian Cameron says, and we've had some transitions. So we've had a couple of staff step up and take on new roles, new responsibilities. We've had staff join us, and we've had staff really just kind of come into their own. Ian is, of course, still with us. That kid in the bottom left is still smiling with us and working alongside as a senior biologist slash advisor, and has been a tremendous support and help to all of the staff, including myself. And we're still very lucky that he's continuing to be involved with this organization that he holds so closely and dear. I'm Kyle Armstrong. I'm the executive director of Peninsula Streams and Shorelines. Katrina, to my right, on the top right there. Katrina Adams is our senior aquatic biologist. Below me is Austin Nolan, standing nice and proud, our pretty much everything guy, support biologist, but don't want to put him in any kind of box. He's definitely Johnny on the spot with many of our programs and operations. To my right is Justin Budick, now the environmental stewardship coordinator. When we was last speaking to you, he was just an intern, a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed intern. And Justin has really come into his own now as an environmental stewardship coordinator for us, kind of wrangling different community groups and different projects and getting their hands dirty and making sure people are getting involved. And down in the bottom row middle, striking an interesting pose, we have the interesting Deborah Deacon, our new education coordinator. So a role that we've been looking to fill for quite some time to kind of wrangle back and rebuild our education programming since it took a fair hit from COVID. And so she's been really busy, thanks to some Red Cross funding, kind of taking a really hard look at the education program, and has some exciting updates for you in her report. And to my right, the beautiful Sue Jallet, our administration coordinator, who basically just keeps this ship moving and underway. So, keeping us all organized, keeping all the numbers together, answering all of the information and calls and forwarding all the emails. Her role knows no bounds, and it has been fantastic having her and keeping us organized and together. So without further ado, let's move into our presentation for this evening. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. Peninsula Streams and Shorelines, of course, we're operating within the traditional territories of the Wasanich and Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt for Lekwungen people, and the Wasanich, including the Sartla First Nation, the Malahat, Sakem, Paucachin, and Sayout nations. So we are very lucky and fortunate to be working in these territories, and also to be working alongside some of these nations in partnership on certain projects, which has led to an overall enrichment of these projects and programs. And we hope to continue to build these relationships with them as we work towards better stewardship and conservation in their territories. Next slide, please. I would also like to thank all of our municipal, provincial, and federal partners and collaborators, in particular the 10 municipalities that we work within and are supported by financially through grant and aid and other budget lines. The support from these, both staff and council, is paramount to the work we do. We often are reaching out for last minute letters of supports for grants applications. We're communicating with staff and working with them out in the field. The level of support and commitment shown by these municipalities is absolutely tremendous, and we feel really, really blessed to be working in such progressive and supportive communities. And that it really shows on the field and in our projects that we have that support. It really makes things move. We are also very lucky to be working within the building at Institute of Ocean Sciences on the blessing of the Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and we're very grateful for their support, not only in the space, but also with different collaborations and things that are going on within our programs, which we'll hear about this evening as well. And including Environment and Climate Change Canada, who fund a number of our programs, and the province of British Columbia. Next slide, please. Thank you also to the many organizations who support our work, both in partnership, but also in funding. Tons of in-kind, but also just really solid funding that we have come to rely on and count on, and couldn't do the work that we do without these organizations. So thank you. Next slide, please. We'd also like to extend a very similar thanks to the corporate sponsors that support our events and programs, who generously support our programs. Thank you. This list is not exhaustive, but certainly highlights some of our larger contributors and consistent contributors. So thank you to these corporations. Next slide, please. I'd like to start off with a map that kind of highlights some of the different areas that we're working, some of the different projects we'll be speaking to tonight. Not all of them have maps attached, but there's a couple of, what these maps show is that we have a really broad and expanding footprint, working in the many different communities and watersheds across the CRD, across Greater Victoria, across the peninsula. We really are present in a number of different systems, working with so many different people, volunteers, partner groups, and organizations. And I think that's testament to our volunteers, to our membership, who kind of pull us into these many different areas and support us in these many different areas. So thanks to you. And yeah, just have a minute and kind of look over some of these. Maybe you can see some of these different projects in your own backyard, or some of these projects you come out to volunteer with. And check back in on the recording if you get lost and want to kind of learn where one of the projects you heard about is. This map can be very helpful. Next slide, please. And yeah, firstly, would just love to reintroduce Austin Nolan and his staff report. Take it away, Austin. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, so I'm Austin Nolan. I'm the support biologist for Peninsula Streams. I am kind of like a little bit involved in everything. But I've been coordinating our beach program for a little over a year now, and we'll be providing updates on our forage fish beach monitoring surveys, our environmental DNA sampling. I'll be talking about our recent addition to the beach program, our European green crab early detection monitoring we've been doing that started up this summer. I'm also going to chat a bit about some in-stream work we did in Tatayat Creek, as well as some recent work we did out at Mermaid Creek. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the beach and beach program stands for Beach Education and Conservation of Habitat. And under this umbrella, we do beach cleans, forage fish egg surveys, restoration, advocacy, conservation, and now green crab surveys out on the local beaches. That's our lucky green crab stance we started doing. It seemed to help us catch a nice diversity of crabs. Next slide, please. So just a quick background on forage fish for those that are unaware. Forage fish are simply the small schooling fish that form the base of the food chain, eating small creatures such as plankton and feeding larger animals like salmon, seals, and seabirds. Examples of forage fish include herring, anchovies, sardines, Pacific sand lance, and surf smelt. Because they're critical to the health of our marine and coastal food chains, determining where they're spawning, their spawning habitat is absolutely crucial. Our surveys target surf smelt and sand lance spawning habitat, which is found in the intertidal zone of sand gravel beaches. That's a sand lance there pictured on the top and a surf smelt on the bottom. They only get to about 8 inches big or so. They're not huge fish. They form schools and feed on plankton. Next slide, please. Here's an update on our numbers from what I covered in our last presentation to members, which was up till the very end of March of this year. We do slow down on sampling during the summertime, but we picked it up again in the fall. Since April, our community scientists have collected 104 samples, surveyed 6 new beaches, and we've had 12 positive surf smelt detections over those surveys. I've also done 6 community scientist training sessions this month, which has brought us about 30 new volunteers to help out. Something to note is that although we are finding surf smelt in the summertime, the eggs are often desiccated due to the heat and long drought and dry periods we're having every summer right now. Many of our spawning beaches are also lacking shade due to backshore development as well. Those are surf smelt eggs pictured there. To give you an idea of scale, each one of those square grids is about 1 millimeter. Next slide, please. Here are our numbers since starting the program back in 2018. We've collected 985 samples, surveyed 105 beaches, split into 162 sample sites. Yeah, we're very close to 1,000. I don't know if we need to have like a party when we hit 1,000. I'm sure we probably will by Friday with Sand Lance Day. We've detected surf smelt a total of 188 times and Pacific sand lance 15 times. So great work, everybody. Those are some more surf smelt eggs there on the right. You can kind of see them developed there. Next slide, please. We're always trying to educate and raise awareness around forage fish and their importance. One of the ways that I do this is by taking students out on the beach where we'll chat about forage fish and I'll run the students through a demo survey. Often the students take a sample back to their school to look at under the microscope, which even if they don't find eggs, it lets them have a look at all the benthic organisms present within the intertidal zone. These samples are not boring. There's worms, there's crustaceans, there's so much cool things to see. Since our last presentation in May, we've reached 75 students. We took Parkland out in June and November. I took St. Michael's University students out. We've got UVic going out next week, and I've got Pearson College grade 12 students in January and Claremont students in February. So lots of education around forage fish. A lot of the students, they just weren't aware. Honestly, I wasn't aware about forage fish until I started working with them. So they're often overlooked, and I think education around them is quite important. Next slide, please. Another way to raise awareness about these important little fish is through public events. We'll often set up a table with information, newsletters, a demo survey kit, and a microscope with eggs for people to look at, which is super popular with the kids especially. World Oceans Day really became World Oceans Week this year. I went to 3 different events. A big shout out to Bud and Kitty for helping me out at Fort Rod Hill. It was very much appreciated. I was also at Roberts Bay for All Buffleheads Day, and I was there when the Victoria Harbour Migratory Bird Sanctuary had their 100th anniversary celebration. Over these 5 events, we reached roughly 1,600 people, which sounds like a lot, but the 2 of the World Oceans Day events, Shaw Center for the Salish Sea and Fisherman's Wharf, were booming. I was talking nonstop for hours and hours. We reached a ton of people. It was a really great way to kind of get the word out there, and we had some good volunteers join up with us because of it. Next slide, please. One other way that we monitor for forage fish, besides doing these beach sediment surveys, is through eDNA collection. eDNA, or environmental DNA. It's very useful for determining species found in the area, especially those cryptic and small species like forage fish. Currently, our awesome community scientists are monitoring 4 sites monthly, including Portage Inlet Linear Park, the Songhees Pocket Beach out at Vim that's newly restored, Billings Spit out in Souk, and 10 Mile Point as well. A huge thank you to the volunteers that are doing that monthly for us. You guys are awesome. Next slide, please. This summer, we started monitoring for the highly invasive European green crab. These crab are native to North Africa and Europe. They got over here in ship ballasts as they have a particularly long larval stage where they're floating in the water column. Green crab are identified by their 5 marginal teeth, which are basically the spikes on the side of each eye. They have 3 rostral bumps, which are sort of these rounded bumps in their facial area. They tend to invade freshwater influenced marine environments first. They impact native ecosystems by outcompeting our native crab species for food, excavating eelgrass beds while looking for invertebrates, feeding on native animals like our clams, our oysters, our mussels, other crabs, and small fish. Their impact on eelgrass beds is a particular concern due to the importance of these beds for our juvenile salmon species. With help from our awesome community scientists, we did 7 surveys, including Roberts Bay, Mermaid Creek, Esquimalt Lagoon, where we know they are and have actually seen them, and Millstream Estuary as well. I chose these locations due to their freshwater influence, availability of prey species, proximity to known green crab infestations, and habitat characteristics such as soft sediments, overhanging banks, these sort of things. Green crab have mostly invaded the west side of the island. The closest really in Greater Victoria is the Esquimalt Lagoon. They're also really heavily infested in Souk Basin. They're also at Whitty's Lagoon. So, it's not too far of a jump to hop over into Millstream Estuary from Esquimalt Lagoon. So we'll keep an eye there. They've been spotted up on Salt Spring Island. Mermaid Creek really meets the characteristics for them to be invading. So we'll keep an eye there as well. Next slide, please. So what we found a lot of really interesting stuff. Good news, we did not find any green crab during our surveys at all. Really, really good news. You kind of want to find them because you're trying to pick habitat where you think they'll be, but it's good that we didn't find them. What we did find was a diversity of native crabs, including many graceful Dungeness and red rock crabs, which are pictured. So that's a graceful in the middle there. You can tell they're smaller, purpley pink legs, cute little guys. That's a Dungeness on the right, a smaller one. And we have a red rock crab down on the bottom right there. We also found a variety of shore crabs, hairy helmet crabs, grainy hermit crabs, many type of sculpins. A sculpin is that fish pictured on the left there. We had a few different types: tide pool, prickly, staghorn, which are really cool. When you pick them up, they like shoot these little spikes up, which hurt pretty bad when they poke you. We also found gunnels, which are sort of these eel-like fishes. They're not true eels. We found red-eyed Medusa jellyfish and a ton of other stuff. And as I said, Mermaid Creek is a good place to keep an eye on. We put one minnow trap in Mermaid Creek, caught almost 100 shore crabs. And that's prey for a European green crab. So we need to keep an eye out there. Massive thank you to everyone who came out and gave us a hand with these surveys. We should be starting these up again in the late spring, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Next slide, please. All right, so moving on to some of the freshwater work I was involved in. We did some in-stream restoration work on Tatayat Creek within the Saanich Historical Artifact Society property. Volunteers helped us reconstruct 2 riffles with spawning gravel beds and spawning gravel additions. I also removed a problem stump that was causing this excessive erosion right adjacent to a bridge. We had to use an excavator. Next slide, please. So here's some before and after photos. As you can see on the left, the top and right on the left there, that's one of the riffles that was reconstructed. As you can see, the log riffle was just leaking and not functioning properly. The water's just making its way underneath and not actually really doing much. So we resealed the riffle, directing the flow over the crest so it can resume oxygenating and cooling the creek during those hot summer months. On the right there, the stump pictured on the right, it was in a sharp bend in the creek, a really sharp turn. And basically what was happening is flow was hitting the upstream side of that stump and pushing back and back getting into the bank and just causing really, really, really excessive erosion right there, especially so close to a bridge. It's just not good. So we pulled it out and we added some rock, did a little habitat complexing to reduce the erosion and provide some hiding places for the fish and just fix it up a little bit. Next slide, please. back in early November, November 10th, I believe it was, about 20 of our volunteers came and helped us out, and we had a very successful plant pulling and planting event towards the top of Mermaid Creek Estuary. We removed species such as Himalayan blackberry, Daphne laurel, and English ivy from the site. We planted 58 appropriate native plants in their place, and we did a little bit of staking as well. That truckload weighed out to about 770 pounds when we got it weighted out, and we left 2 piles of blackberry behind, which we dealt with a little later. So I think it's pretty safe to say that a little over 1,000 pounds of vegetation was removed, which is just absolutely amazing. Thank you everybody who came out and helped with that. Obviously, we couldn't have done that without you. Just taking that load and trying to get it out of the truck took me an hour and a half. That tells you how much vegetation we took off the banks there. So good job, everybody. Next slide, please. And I wanted to finish off with a big shout out to our community scientists. I'm constantly inspired by your passion and willingness to help out, going out to survey in the dark and the cold, facing your fears and measuring some huge disgruntled red rock crabs with their big claws, spreading information and handing out brochures during your surveys, looking at countless samples under your microscope. These programs would not be possible without you giving your time and energy. So thank you very much. We could not do this without you guys. It's fantastic work. Next slide, please. And that's pretty much it from me. You could reach out to me for anything really beach related. If you're interested in green crab surveys or forage fish surveys, there's going to be some training sessions upcoming. Forage fish in the early new year, green crab in the late spring. Reach out to me or just keep an eye on your email for those Keela call outs will do. I'd like to pass it off to Justin, our stewardship coordinator.
Thanks, Austin. Like Austin mentioned, my name is Justin Budick. I'm the Environmental Stewardship Coordinator at Peninsula Streams, and this is a relatively new title for me. I transferred from just being a technician in early summer to being the Environmental Stewardship Coordinator. So my update is going to be a little bit of education and other materials as well as stewardship. Rain Gardens for Headwaters program is something that I've taken on as well, as Kyle, our new executive director, has moved up the PSS food chain a little bit. So that used to be his portfolio and it is now mine. So yeah, without further ado, let's go on to the next slide. So this past spring, I helped roll out our grade 3 program, which involves teaching grade 3 classes and sometimes grade 2s and 4s across Greater Victoria about watersheds, the water cycle, common types of pollution, which were depicted on our watershed model with drink crystals and soy sauce, which I had to make sure the kids were not eating, unfortunately, because they always want to taste with their mouths, and also the salmon life cycle. So using the watershed model, kids were able to see how water moves across the landscape and eventually into the streams and the ocean. It was an absolute pleasure to be around these energetically curious minds and see the gears turning in their heads, and for them to kind of make these connections between what happens in one part of a watershed matters to another part of a watershed. So we use this watershed model to usually of their local area to show how these contaminants can move into our streams and affect local fish populations. And then in terms of the salmon life cycle, after some sitting down educational programming, we played a salmon life cycle game, which got the kids up and moving, and they're really excited about that. And one child summed it up really well after getting eaten by a bear for the 5th time in a row as we were playing this game. He remarked to me that, wow, it's really hard being a salmon. And I think these lessons are sticking if those are the points that they're coming away with. So hopefully these educational programs are translating into a new generation of environmental stewards. And we're able to contact a lot of different schools, classes, and students. So 470 students in all received this educational programming. So it was a really, really great time. Next slide, please. So on to rain gardens. Our our biggest rain garden that we've built to date is at Monterey Middle School, and it's really come a long way since being planted in the fall of 2022. As you can see in the bottom two pictures, even from spring until fall, the change is quite remarkable. And that's in no small part thanks to everyone who's volunteered their time. So PSS volunteers, Friends of Belker Creek volunteers, community members, and of course the staff and students at Monterey Middle. So just this summer, there was a lot of weeds at the garden, and the volunteers put in over 25 hours of weeding and mulching. And we were able to make that garden as beautiful and functional as you can see in that middle bottom picture. And also what's also was allowed to happen in October, thanks to all that volunteer effort, was a fantastic planting event with the Monterey Middle School students. So we were able to put in a bunch more yarrow and goldenrod and different woody shrubs with those students. And it was just a fantastic learning opportunity for them, which was also complemented by a lot of in-class learning through workshops and presentations with those students. And you know, it's functioning super well. I was over there just the other day after that large rain event, and all of the water that was coming from the school parking lot, which actually had a bit of an oily sheen, was being deposited in the garden, and was being cooled and filtered and retained by that rain garden before it actually was able to work its way into the surrounding watershed. So this mini urban wetland is working really well in Oak Bay, and we want to build more, which I'll get to. But first of all, let's go to our campus view garden. Oh, and I will also mention the slide was a couple more before, which you don't have to go back to, Sue. But so the rain garden lessons that I've been able to roll out have been quite expansive. We've been able to reach 4 schools, 187 students, and have over 280 contact hours where we're teaching kids from middle school up to later high school about proper stormwater etiquette, native plants, stormwater, and many other different important topics. So Campus View Elementary, there was severe flooding issues that was plaguing the staff parking lot for a long period of time. And these problems have been resolved from the rain gardens that we've been able to put in there, which the principal, whenever I talk to him, is just so grateful for. And so in total, our volunteers put in a total of 13 maintenance hours at Campus View this summer. And I'd like to give a special shout out to the environmental science grade 11 class at Mount Doug High School, which is just down the street. They were some of the lead stewards on this project. They used this applied learning opportunity to learn about native plants and all the different educational things that we were doing in the classroom. They were applying it and learning in the field as well, through weeding, mulching, planting, and many other activities. So yeah, it was just a really great opportunity for them, and has also inspired them, because there was a rain garden proposal project that myself and the teacher came up with for the students to complete end of last year. And that is actually translated to, I just had an email in my inbox earlier this week that some of those students in another class are actually now trying to design a rain garden for the school. So who knows, maybe the next rain garden that we'll be building will be a student designed one at Mount Doug Secondary. And just a brief thank you to School Division 61 staff and administration at those schools for all their support and cooperation, because we want to build more rain gardens at these schools, and just your support is really great. Is really great, and we couldn't have done it without you. Next slide. So speaking of a student design rain garden, one that we have in the docket at the moment is at St. Michael's University School. This is a small garden that, if you look at the picture on the left, it'll just be about 1.5 meters wide and extending the length of the fence. And while it's not going to be draining a large area, about 65 meters squared, it's a very grassy area that is struggling with erosion and pooling of water. So there's a lot of traffic that goes through there to the school, and by adding a rain garden to that location, that will help with the excess water, and it will be able to absorb that excess water and reduce the erosion on site. And the students are actively engaged in this design process. We've done many presentations and workshops with a small 15 or so cohort of students. And quite recently, about a month ago, as you can see in that top right picture, the students presented to myself and to the grounds staff at SMU a rain garden design that they have made. And so at this point, I will be taking that design and modifying it slightly and bringing it to the school division, or sorry, the school for final approval. But we're hoping to be able to have that hand-built rain garden, which the students will be a part of, built in the next year or so. Next slide, please. And another exciting project that we have in the works is at Parkdale Church and Childhood Center. This is a much larger catchment area, so the impervious surfaces that are being drained is about 500 meters squared, and so all the contaminants from this parking lot, from oil to all sorts of other contaminants that will be present, are currently flowing into that storm drain, and even the AstroTurf that you can see in that center picture, which, if anyone has heard what's happening at Oak Bay High School, AstroTurf can find its way into the creek very easily. So by having a rain garden built there, it's a very long cylindrical design that is going to be spanning about 6 parking lot stalls. That garden will be able to capture that water and make sure none of those contaminants make its way into the Cecilia Creek watershed. And yeah, so we're going to be working with our partners at the City of Victoria, the church, and the community, Friends of Bowker Creek, to make this garden happen in 2024. Yeah, next slide, please. So now I'll move on to stewardship, because other than rain gardens, stewardship is my other portfolio that I'm responsible for. And in my new role as environmental stewardship coordinator, I've had the opportunity to organize a lot of the volunteers across Greater Victoria on the projects that you're going to be hearing about in these presentations. And all these many of these projects that you can see depicted on this map to the left are made possible by volunteers. But some of our volunteers are also watershed stewards, and they have taken more of a keen interest in learning about and protecting streams and shorelines in their backyard. So I'd like to briefly highlight 2 of these groups that I've been helping organize and facilitate over the last 6 months. And yeah, so first off is the Kiwanis Stewardship Group. So the Kiwanis Stewardship Group was revived this past year, and a passionate group of people from across central Saanich have come together to protect and restore Hagen and Graham Creeks. We've removed a massive amount of invasive blackberry and Daphne and ivy from Centennial and Butterfield parks. And another focus area that we've been concentrating on is Hagen Creek, right at the end of Malcolm Road. This reach has been restored over the years by PSS to the benefit of a cutthroat trout population, and the Kiwanis Group has been caring for it through repeated invasive species pulls, fencing of mature trees from a local beaver that's been running rampant, as well as planting dozens of alders, Douglas fir, and cedar saplings in the riparian zone. So all this work that they've been doing has not gone unnoticed. Just this week, a few of us at PSS, as well as the Kiwanis Stewardship Group, were invited to weigh in on the Central Saanich Parks and Trails Master Plan that is being developed over the next year. And through this process, they and PSS will be advocating for the continued protection and expansion of protections along Hagen and Graham Creeks. Next slide, please. So the other stewardship group that I've been working closely with is the Friends of Millstream Watershed. Like the Kiwanis group, this group was formed in the winter of 2023 and have been engaged in restoration activities around the Millstream watershed, including invasive species removal and creek cleans. This past summer, the group has also helped out at Cedarvale Park in the building of riffles and spawning beds. I won't touch too much on that because I don't want to steal the limelight from Katrina, and she'll be talking more about that project later on in this presentation. It's also worth mentioning that the Friends of Millstream Watershed is assisting us and the BC Conservation Foundation in monitoring for a pollutant known as 6-ppd quinone in Millstream and Gabo creeks. If you don't know what 6-ppd is, it's essentially a compound that is found in car tires, and it rubs off when they are rolling on the road, and it gets flushed into our local stormwater system, which eventually finds its way into the creek. 6-ppd has been shown to be lethal to juvenile salmon, especially coho, and the Millstream group has been collecting water samples before, during, and after large rain events to see how much of an issue this is for our urban systems. So that's a huge help for early detection. Next slide, please. And I mean, I can only touch on a few different things that we're doing with our stewardship groups and volunteers, but I've already mentioned 6-ppd monitoring, but myself, Austin, and Deb all had the opportunity to conduct stream keeper training with the Pacific Stream Keepers Federation this past summer. Katrina and Austin already have this training, and I'm really looking forward to start training our stewardship groups on these methods, and for them to eventually be able to conduct habitat surveys, water quality testing, and other in-stream activities to start monitoring our local watersheds. And in fact, some of this training has already been done in the Millstream and Bilston Creek watersheds through work that Katrina and others have done. And I'll finally mention that a water quality monitoring program that is happening in the central Saanich area, the Tatayat and Kiwanis watersheds, which has been going on for over 20 years. Our stewards, especially some in the Kiwanis stewardship group, have been diligently monitoring 15 different sites on a monthly basis for a host of different physical and chemical parameters. This long-standing data set is extremely important for us to know what's happening in these watersheds and what threats they face and how we can properly mitigate them. Next slide. And that's it from me. If you have any questions or you're interested in getting involved with one of our stewardship groups or volunteering or rain gardens, if you have a rain garden location that you think I might be interested in, please shoot me an email. I'm always happy to hear from you. Thanks so much. Oh, right. And I guess I'll pass it on now to Deb Deacon, our new environmental education and outreach specialist.
Thank you so much. So hi, everybody. My name is Deborah, but please call me Deb. More to the point, I think. Yeah, I'm really happy to be with Peninsula Streams. I joined mid-August, and I am filling that role that Kyle mentioned that the Red Cross is funding. So big shout out to the Red Cross and also to our other funders for the education program, particularly Victoria Foundation is also one of those. And then there are quite a few. So yeah, anyways, I'm going to today be talking a little bit about some program development that we're doing and the environmental education programs just in general, and then some outreach updates as well. But I'll do a little introduction on the next slide. So as I mentioned, I started a few months ago. My background, I have a master's in history, so I'm not an environmental scientist or a biologist. So, you know, I have many friends who are, and they ask me, how did you get that job? I say, you know, sheer charisma. Just kidding. So I basically have 5 years of experience working in education program development and implementation. Not particularly with environmental science or ecology, but with a range of topics from everything from Indigenous history and culture to financial literacy, mental health, climate action. We've worked with my last job that I worked at for 5 years was a company called Chatter High, and we did online education for grades 6 to 12, so across the country. So working with schools, districts, First Nations, nonprofits, and government agencies, that was my particular skill set, and developing these education programs as well. Next slide, please. So you can see on the right education program guides, just a little peek at what I'm developing. So every one of our education programs will have some great collateral to advertise it to the world, essentially. So some in-class kind of primer material for teachers that are getting engaged in our programs. This will be for districts as well to understand how they can get involved. And essentially, and also for our volunteers. So a really standardized way of bringing our volunteers into our education program. I think we have a lot of people that are keen to work with kids. It's very energizing and gives you some hope for the future, seeing them so excited about it. So we're going to be doing our best to get our volunteers engaged in the education programming again. And yes, it is a great photo. There's Ian Bruce there with the watershed. Lots of hand gestures. I've kind of is pretty key to these watershed model demonstrations that we've done those, or we did a lot of those last spring before I came on board. So I'll talk about those too. Other things that we're doing in this program development phase, which is a big part of my role here, is building curriculum connections, or rather they already exist, and it's more about formalizing and standardizing and really highlighting how our education programs deliver on curriculum, curricular outcomes for K-12. And also integrating First Peoples principles of learning, some traditional knowledge. We already do a lot of that. I think we don't give ourselves credit. You know, we really do. And I've noticed in a lot of our education kind of collateral, it's a really important part of Peninsula Streams, and that's something I admire about the organization, and something I'm going to be kind of encouraging and finding more of in our resources. Also partnering with some other organizations, developing those partnerships a little bit more, and those would involve great people like Stream to Sea, Engage with Nature-Based Solutions, Salmon in the City, Swan Lake Nature Sanctuary, and more. Next slide, please. So Creatures of Habitat is a program that many of you are familiar with. It's got quite the legacy here at Peninsula Streams and around the peninsula. I've heard myself from, teachers and students that say, oh yeah, I remember that, or I taught that, or I had that come to my classroom, or I remember doing that when I was in grade 6. So it has quite a long history and been large legacy, and I'm really excited to take that on. In May, we did a program with Bayside Middle at Todd Inlet, 80 students. This October, Colquitt's Middle, 70 students. Those are really small, considering what we're capable of on these Creatures of Habitat days. But as now I'm in this role, we're going to really go guns a-blazing here. And in the spring, we've got Royal Oak Middle, North Saanich Middle. These, in each case, we're going to be working with 400 students each. So it's going to be quite a massive undertaking. This is where I plug that I will need some volunteers. So if you are watching, if there's anything I can do to persuade you, definitely need some volunteers for that. Next slide, please. Other middle school programming. So we worked with the vice principal at Colquitt's Middle School this year on some riparian zone education, native and invasive species. This was very reminiscent of our Creatures of Habitat program, and I think it gave me some insight into how these lessons can be given. But that was sort of more of a kind of trial and tester, but it was really fun, and the kids were very engaged. as Justin mentioned, the Monterey and Campus View rain gardens and the SMU, St. Michael's University School rain gardens. So these are also opportunities for students to learn. There's, learning is happening in everything that everybody at Peninsula Streams does. And so it's exciting to see it happening. Next slide, please. High school programming. So again, we did rain garden education with Mount Doug, and Austin's got the beach program. We did that with Parkland, and we've got a lot of interest in that too moving forward. We also did water quality and invertebrate sampling with Stellies, which was really interesting for me, and it's kind of led me in the direction of developing. We'll likely have where we kind of do have, but it's going to be more formalized and standardized, a water quality high school program. And that will heavily rely on the invertebrate sampling as a measure of water quality, which I was so fascinated to learn about that in the Streamkeepers training. Invertebrates were my favorite part. So I'm really excited to develop a program that's really focused on water quality and invertebrates. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this spring, we're going to be doing the Creatures of Habitat. We are also partnering with Stream to Sea to support them with their fry releases and storm drain marking, those yellow fish that you see on storm drains. So lots of fun stuff, the grade 3 programming, the watershed models. I pulled them all out of the trailer yesterday and had them all on my driveway and was kind of looking at what needs to be fixed. And I'll kind of get to that in a moment. We also get requests for nature walks. So those are sort of more on a as requested basis, but lots going on, lots happening this spring. And sort of as I get my feet underneath me, get away, familiar with all the ins and outs of the education program, we'll see a lot bigger numbers kind of moving forward. Next slide, please. Engagement numbers. So again, I cannot take credit for most of these. This was all kind of the team. The team has been running the education programs, and off the side of their desks, and they're doing all this amazing work. And I'm kind of slowly taking on these programs, but really big shout out to everybody on the team for their education work. Austin with the beach education program, Justin with rain garden education, and the watershed model and salmon life cycle education in the spring that I wasn't here for, Creatures of Habitat, other middle school programming, high school programming looks kind of, I think actually I found another batch of numbers. I think we're past 1,000 so far. But my plan is to at least double that for this time next year. So yeah, lots of exciting numbers here. Next slide, please. So this is what I mentioned, those watershed models, we're in need of repair. So I thought I would mention that here. In addition to wanting volunteers for our spring programming with Creatures of Habitat, the grade 3s, some high school activities too. One of the big parts of one of the big focuses I have right now is on repairing and replenishing our education materials. Part of that involves applying for grants so that we can kind of, pay for that work. But our volunteers are really supportive, I think, of the education program, and we're going to see if we can get maybe some hands to fix some of these. They just need a little bit of love, a little bit of TLC. So if that's something that might interest you, please reach out to me. And it's sort of kind of a little, we're trying to do this maybe before the spring program really takes off. So in the next few months. Next slide, please. And then looking at outreach. So we're continuing our outreach to schools, building relationships with our schools and our school districts, both independent and public schools. And of course, community groups as well. We're open to anyone who wants to, wants education. That's why I'm here. So, and then in terms of outreach, as Austin mentioned, we've done these outreach kind of events, or Austin's done them, the Buffleheads Day, the Victoria Migratory Sanctuary, there's all the, and Saanich Fair, Saanich Fair we were at, that's a picture of it on the right. So continuing to kind of show ourselves at those outreach events. Other things that are part of my mandate are to kind of evaluate the performance of our social media efforts and website traffic, and really look at the analytics there and see what we can do to improve our engagement with those digital media. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, and there's a big part of my experience and skill set is that communication side of things. So I'm looking forward to developing that. You'll hear through the presentations, I think we're kind of putting up some signs, but that's something that we really want to work a little bit more on, is the signage. And yeah, I guess just ending it with follow us on social media. I think that might be my last slide, but let's see here. Yeah, that was it. Okay. And I forgot to put my email there on that. So I'm going to drop my email into the chat for you all. But it's pretty pretty expecting is peninsula-streams.ca. There you go. All right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. Oh, sorry. Next, we have Katrina Adams, Senior Aquatic Biologist. Take it away, Katrina.
Thanks so much, Deb. Can everyone hear me? I think I'm on my phone here. My internet's been really bad. All right, thanks everyone. I'm Katrina Adams, for those of you who don't know, and I am the Senior Aquatic Biologist. My main focus is more on the freshwater restoration projects, as well as a few other side projects as well. So you can skip to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm just going to give you a brief update on the projects I've been working on over the summer and fall, as well as chat a little bit about some of the upcoming work that I'll be doing over the spring and next summer as well. There's some really exciting things happening, and yeah, excited to chat more about it. I'll start off with one of my larger projects I'm working on. This one is in partnership with Sartlip First Nation. This is on the Make-A-Witch property, or the former Woodwind property, and was given back to the nation in 2020, I believe. It's a really huge piece of property. It's about 78 hectares, right in the Hagen-Graham-Quannas watershed. And there's about 1.5 kilometers of Hagen Creek flowing through this land. Super beautiful piece of property. There's a lot of opportunity for restoration in terms of main stem restoration of Hagen Creek itself. There's 3 tributaries that could provide great trout habitat, as well as floodplain reconnection, and a lot of riparian habitat enhancement is needed as well. If you want to skip to the next slide. So some of the work that we have been working on this property for the last year or so started obviously with planning and partnership building, working with the nation to find out what their needs are or ideas what are for this project. And so we started off with a hydrologic study, to get a better understanding of the creek and what the water is doing. One of the biggest challenges that we're facing with this project is controlling reed canary grass. It has completely taken over the riparian and the creek itself. So we're kind of trying anything and everything to try and get this invasive plant under control. Reed canary grass grows these immensely thick rhizomal root mats, so it can be really, really tricky to remove. And they can completely take over and outcompete other native plants. So it's a really, really tricky plant to work with, and can have massive problems in terms of totally ingrowing a creek and removing habitat. So a big problem, or something we're trying to sort out, is how to control this invasive species. And one easy way is using an excavator. As you can see here, this massive one, there's me as scale for the bucket on it. So it is huge, but we got a lot of area cleared off, and then putting down thick cardboard to try and suppress the regrowth of the grass, and now trying to plant. Of course, we have a huge property to work on, so it's going to take many, many years, probably my lifetime of work on here, but it's definitely worth it and very exciting as well. Other work we did was working in one of the tributaries to try and enhance the stream for cutthroat trout. particularly providing spawning habitat, as well as planting. Next slide. Just a few photos of the work that we've been doing over the last year. A lot of really great work days, field days out on the farm, beautiful area to be working in. We've been doing some drone mapping, you can see on the far right, to get a better idea of the current sort of status of the whole land, piece of land, as well as providing really high quality ortho photos, which we can then use for design. We've been installing groundwater monitoring wells, which is that middle bottom photo that gives us a chance to get a better understanding of what the water table is doing. You can see that sort of standing inundated area there. This was taken in, I think about a month ago or so. So this is just on the right bank of the creek, in the sort of floodplain area. So it really gives us an opportunity or ideas that there's a great opportunity to do some wetland restoration here. That's what we're currently working on designing. Mike Desjardins, you can see him sort of waist deep in the creek there. He is our main partner from Stewardship Group. I've been working really closely with him on this project. In that little pool there where he's standing, that's in Hagen Creek, me and Austin caught about 30 cutthroat trout just in this small pool. So really gives us an idea that there's a lot of fish here. It's a really important habitat for these coastal cutthroat trout, and restoration is definitely needed as much of that open water is slowly getting infilled by reed canary grass. Next slide. Just a little before after of the tributary restoration. So that before photo, this was taken last spring. So the reed canary grass hasn't even gotten to its full height. Essentially, you could not even tell that there was a creek there at all. Just a tiny little trickle of water, completely infilled. So we grabbed the excavator and pulled back that reed canary grass and put down that thick cardboard, which you can see in the after photo there. We're just currently working on planting through that cardboard. Essentially, the cardboard is meant to suppress the regrowth of reed canary grass. It can grow back so quickly. And then with planting, eventually we're planting fast growing species that will provide shade. And shading out reed canary grass is the best long-term deterrent of reed canary grass. But of course, you know, you have to really plant quickly and right away for it to have any sort of effect in the short term. So it's a lot of work, but definitely worth it. And we also, with the help of the Quanah Stewardship group, as well as some other volunteers, we had a great community event where we placed down spawning gravel appropriate for cutthroat trout, and then some in-stream habitat through boulders and cobbles. We'll be monitoring this little tributary and spawning habitat this coming early winter, and hopefully find some evidence of trout spawning there as well. There's definitely a lot more to be done in this one tributary and then the other two as well. Next slide. So next steps for the Make-A-Witch project. So continue reed canary grass. This will be my life's work to try and maintain or try and manage that awful invasive plant. But obviously riparian enhancement goes along with that, and planting, which we'll be working on. In the photo there, about 500 native plants were delivered a few weeks ago. So we're just currently trying to get those in the ground as fast as we can. Restoration planning. So next summer, we're hoping to do a nice big project there, looking at floodplain reconnection, wetland restoration, main stem restoration. So gathering a really great team with a ton of different backgrounds, all working together to try and create a really great project design for this beautiful property. Next slide. Millstream. This is one of the other watersheds I've been doing a lot of work in. My main project here is the PIT tag program. So PIT stands for Passive Integrated Transponder. Essentially, it's a tiny little tag that's about the size of a grain of rice that gets inserted into the body cavity of a fish, mostly coho fry at this point. And once that fish swims over the antenna array, which you can see in that sort of black ladder looking structure on the far right, the array will register a unique ID for that fish. And then when I go and download the data, I can get a sense of timing. So how long did it take for that fish to swim from where we released it up in the upper watershed? How long did it take to swim over the array, which is down right near the outlet? We can also get a sense of when they return and survivorship as well. So a lot of really powerful data can be taken from pit tagging. So we started this program in 2022, where we released 2,000 pit tagged fish. We did the same in early 23. And then in May 23, we installed a permanent array. So this antenna will be in the water for the duration of the project, so many, many years. Unfortunately, we did not get any return data from 22, which we were potentially expecting some to come through, but it's been a really poor return year for southern Vancouver watersheds, unfortunately, so a little disappointing. I will be going there early next week, and hopefully with this big rain event, maybe some really last minute spawners have come up, but yeah, we'll see about that. We just tagged another 2,000 fish, and they will be going into Millstream next week, so that'll be really exciting, and hopefully in the next few years we'll see them come back. Next slide. Restoration. So this last August, we had a really great project in the Cedar Vale Park, which is right near Highway 1. We restored about 100 meters or so of the creek, where we added a large riffle. So essentially this section had very little rock left, and so we brought in a lot of rock. This was all hand built, this riffle, so a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into moving cobble and gravel into the stream, building a riffle, adding a spawning bed, multiple spawning beds, putting in erosion protection. This was done with an excavator, you can see in that photo there, to protect an eroding bank. This also provided in-stream cover through large woody debris additions, and we also put in some habitat boulders as well. This work could not have been done without the amazing volunteers from the Friends of Millstream Watershed, as well as other groups. Yeah, it was a really fun few days getting that rock in there, and it's looking beautiful. If you skip to the next slide. Here's a before and after. So that before, you can see there's hardly any rock at all. And then after, it's completely different. It's riffles beautifully. You can hear it really nicely, and a very large spawning bed, perfect for trout, both cutthroat and rainbow as well. And then hopefully potentially coho in the future as well. It's looking a little bit different now after the big flooding event from the atmospheric river Monday? But that's what it's supposed to do. There is a floodplain there, so it's functioning quite well. And yeah, hopefully we will be doing some more work in this park next summer. Next slide. Colquitts. There is a lot happening in Colquitts watershed. I'll chat a little bit about what we did, but also some plans for the future too. Some pretty exciting things happening there. So if you just skip to the next slide. One of the big things we did early in May of this year, myself, some other PSS staff, and Saanich Park staff walked almost the entirety of the Colquitts River from the outlet to just before the CRD parks near Beaver Lake. We were mapping and assessing the current habitat of the Colquitts, as well as identifying potential restoration opportunities. This assessment gives us the idea, or gives us the information that we need to prioritize where restoration is needed most. So using this report, which we're currently writing right now and is forthcoming, we can determine where we need to focus our attention to. And so there's certainly a lot that was as identified, and we will be working. It's almost like a shopping list of restoration projects. Next slide. For restoration itself, instead of one larger project this year, we collaborated with Saanich on multiple smaller ones in the Colquitts, one being Gabo Creek, a really important overwintering rearing habitat for coho fry. Just in this small little section, about 20 meters long or so, we caught 100 fry. So there's a big potential in Gabo for enhancing that overwintering habitat. Lone Home, so where Lone Home Road just crosses over the Colquitts, we put in 2 riffles and multiple spawning beds, as well as riparian enhancement. So we took out a huge whack full of blackberry, and that will be some staking and planting happening as well. And then a smaller project in Goward Springs, another important tributary for the Colquitts, where spawning habitat was restored as well. So a total of about 100 meters in the Colquitts and their tributaries, of course, of in-stream habitat, and then riparian areas as well. Come this early winter, we'll be doing a lot of staking and planting as well. So stay tuned for some volunteer events with planting. Next slide. Swan Creek, another really important tributary of Colquitts. We did a larger project here, about 300 meters we worked in. So all those blue pins that you see in the map all had a different restoration prescription that was done. A big chunk of it, mostly the ones downstream of the, so I guess above the Mackenzie overpass, were done in collaboration with the Saanich Parks, all done by hand. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went in this. Of course, we chose to do it the hottest time of the summer, but really rewarding work, and it's functioning really, really well right now. And then we had a great volunteer event where we had about 10 dedicated volunteers moving rock, lifting boulders, carrying buckets of gravel down, and rebuilding several riffles that are also functioning perfectly right now in the higher flow. So yeah, really successful project. Building riffles, adding spawning gravel, in-stream cover, and riparian habitat enhancement as well. Next slide. Sure, the photos are uploading a little bit slowly there. There we go. So just a few photos of the work that we did with Saanich in Swan. So you can see in the top left, Austin rebuilding a riffle that is that had already existed but needed a bit of work underneath the Mackenzie overpass. Top right photo, we are installing a feature called brush bundles. So essentially we bundle together cedar boughs, or cypress in this case, is sort of from the arborist department. They had some leftover cypress, so we used that. Essentially, we bundle them together and duckbill them into the eroding bank. It provides amazing habitat for fish. It also helps to dissipate the energy from the water against that eroding bank. It's also extremely cost effective and is easily installed, especially in areas where you can't get an excavator in to do that erosion protection. So these brush bundles are really great to use in sort of like, yeah, difficult to access spots, which this one was here. And that middle bottom photo there was taken just a few days ago after that atmospheric river. And you can just see the brush bundles. They sort of are able to rise when the water levels come up, but still provide that really important in-stream cover for fish. So yeah, they're functioning really great, and it's exciting to see that work. And we'll definitely be doing more of this technique as well. That one photo with the red circle shows a red, so that's a salmon nest that was taken about a few weeks ago now, and is one of the only active signs of spawning that we've seen in the Colquitts watershed this spawning season. It was really, really disappointing year for returns. No concrete numbers, but we had like I didn't see the fish make this nest, but we had a neighbor of Swan Creek that had seen coho spawning there. Of course, I'm not everywhere all the time, but yeah, just in all the normal spots where I would see active spawning, I didn't see anything this year. So yeah, pretty disappointing, but certainly a sign that you know, more work is needed, and a lot of studies are needed too, which I will chat about in a second. Next slide. So next steps, just following what I said, there's a lot coming down the pipe and really exciting projects. One that many of these are still early days, but one of the projects we are looking at starting is installing a smolt trap to get a better understanding of the numbers of coho leaving in the early spring, as well as cutthroat trout we're looking at. There's a lot to be understood with cutthroat. and in our Colquitt, Craigflower watersheds, as well as Portage Inlet. So we're excited to start learning more about the cutthroat, how they move and their population within these watersheds and different systems. So also looking at doing pit tagging, so doing some wild tagging of fish, both coho and cutthroat. Really exciting, looking at doing some potential acoustic tagging, which sort of gives you almost real-time data of where fish are moving. This will be focused on cutthroat trout in partnership with the province. So essentially using receivers placed in various locations spread out through Portage Inlet, the gorge and beyond, we'll get a sense of how long the cutthroat are staying within, the estuary system, how they're moving around. So yeah, really exciting project. I'm pretty keen on getting this one going. And of course, continued restoration. There's a lot that needs to be done. From our assessment, we have identified a lot of priorities, and we'll be working on those over the next few years. Next slide. Now, just finish off, this is another project I've been helping out with. So Anne-Marie Daniel from Nature R&D, she brought this up the last presentation, but I wanted to sort of give a few updates. This Rush initiative, I definitely encourage everyone to check out the website at whatstherush.ca. There's a lot of new maps on there, a lot of new data. Really, really exciting initiative. Essentially, it's a platform that sort of asks these big existential questions around climate change, and provides answers or ways to find answers about those questions through gathered data all in one place. Data from the CRD, various municipalities, the government, various governments, but also from community mapping. There's a lot of data collected from community members of local rain gardens that are in their backyards, or pollinator gardens, or in the example here of big trees that are mapped in your backyard, sort of answering questions around carbon sequestration and canopy cover and all the things that go along with that. So there's a lot of amazing data on here, all sort of gathered in one place and sort of presented in a really easy to understand way. So definitely encourage everyone to check it out. And there is a little feedback button on that top right corner. So, if there's anything that you would love to see on this, or if something doesn't quite function the way you expect, we definitely encourage folks to provide some feedback, and it will certainly be incorporated in coming versions. We're hoping to do a big launch for this initiative in the new year, and there's a lot more coming down, a lot of exciting things coming down for this initiative, and it's quite exciting. And with that, I will finish off my presentation. Thanks, everyone. And I will pass it off to Kyle.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Katrina. That is amazing. That is a lot of stuff. Congratulations. That is a lot of really great work that you've done there. And you've had a very busy summer, and we're very happy that you're still standing. So thanks to you and to the whole team, really, for all those wonderful presentations. We're running low on time. We got about 15 minutes before, and it doesn't look like I'm going to let anyone out early. I apologize, but I do want to leave time for questions. So I'm just going to kind of blow through my report here. Next slide, please. Just a quick update on the Hospital Creek Estuary and work that we're doing in marsh restoration in Portage Inlet. For a quick kind of rebrief, we essentially came across a marsh at Hospital Creek mouth in the estuary there. It was very heavily being grazed by Canada geese and other waterfowl. We tried an experimental exclosure using pencil posts and plastic pier fencing to just remove that pressure. And within a year, we saw amazing results. So the 4 foot on the left, 1 year later, exactly on the right, lots of vegetation returning. Next slide, please. We also saw kind of, throughout time, this passive restoration over the mudflats itself. So we see Salicornia and other marsh species actually colonizing empty mudflats. So this was really encouraging results, and continues to be as this infills. That'll work to capture more sediment, more vegetation as the marsh continues to work its way out. Next slide, please. With this encouragement, we basically expanded our effort using a technique called ecocultural fencing with volunteers, which is essentially wattle fencing, without the expectation that it's going to grow. So we're using alder posts and willow whips and creating fencing that selectively excludes Canada geese, while letting other things like mammals, ducks, and other species to transit, and fish, more importantly. And in these areas, we tried some experimental sedge plantings, which didn't fare quite as well as we had hoped. And with this, we are trying a number of different things throughout this year to try to figure out why. And the leading hypotheses, although we have many, is that the drainage of these areas has been impacted from the infilling and erosion. The channels aren't established properly. You have anoxic, highly saline soils, where the sedge can just not take. So the only places where we've seen survivorship in these kind of where we've planted out are in really well drained areas or have really good freshwater inputs pouring in. Yeah, next slide, please. But we're not fully discouraged because it is still providing the protection. So, this is in the nearby Craigflower, which flows into Portage Inlet, where we've also right along View Royal Park, that has some of the most amazing sedge populations, that we see on this part of the island, still remaining. And as you move up the stream and you get more confined and a little bit more claustrophobic for the geese, you see those sedge populations really bustling like on the right. And as you move down the stream to areas where the geese are really quite confident and able to graze, you see it become much more sparse and a lot more kind of empty mud flats. Next slide, please. So we went to work and did a lot more of the ecocultural fencing, working with Tim Claremont and his group, as well as the Pacific Salmon Resilient Estuaries team, Pacific Salmon Foundation, pardon me, and other partners in the Gorge Waterway area, to really expand this initiative. While we work to kind of with Sea Change, who has the Resilient Estuaries program, and other partners to kind of try to figure out the best way to amend the sediment and the mud to have sedge be able to survive. And we can reestablish these marsh benches that are so important for many species, but in particular, rearing salmon. Next slide, please. A quick update on the Mermaid Creek Marsh project in Roberts Bay. Austin had some great updates in terms of invasive species removals and plantings in the upper marsh area. So that's the area kind of below the yellow zone there, up the creek. We have, as you may or may not know, a large proposal underway to undertake work of a large salt marsh restoration project, which I've provided updates in previous staff reports. For more details, check that out. I just wanted to give the update that we're still under review for permitting under the province. And so this project is still to be determined. The sedge plantings that we did upstream faced kind of the same issues as the other areas. And so with, again, Sea Change, looking at, what's going on in the system in terms of maybe contaminants, or again, that salt drainage and what kind of soil amendments can be made to replant sedge and get that marsh bench established, which is so important in this case for stabilization and for kind of helping to protect the remaining marsh from erosion as it's rapidly eroding due to development and upwater stormwater flows being concentrated into that area. Next slide, please. I really am excited to give this update. The Songhees Walkway Pocket Beach, located at the end of Cooper Street next to the Victoria International Marina. We were able to complete the second phase, and that project is complete. This was a wonderful, wonderful partnership between the City of Victoria, the Songhees First Nation, the Esquimalt Nation, the Pacific Salmon Foundation, as well as many other partners coming in on this one, Destination Greater Victoria, as well as just many, many different friends providing input and help. It was a long time coming, a really fantastic project with lots of challenges. It was kind of one of the first projects and meeting of Ian Bruce and myself was down at this site, and it's a really great one that we were able to finish up. Next slide, please. So just some quick photos of the work that happened since the first phase that we completed, which was removing all of the riprap and kind of cement and contaminated materials and junk basically, and putting in that nice base of forage fish-friendly sediments. and then which we actually had smelt returned to in a great celebration. This next phase was to basically expand that backshore area. So we excavated back into the backshore, re-armored it in terms of building a rock wall to kind of help contain some of those backshore sediments where there were cultural features, so archaeological remains and features like midden. The soil that was excavated was, because it was that midden material, extremely good for planting into. And we were able to plant, many species of native plants into that backshore area. Next slide, please. And since its completion, it has been really well celebrated and uptaken by the community. If you go down there on any given day in the summer, there's people launching their paddle boards, enjoying the sun, people looking at the native plants. It's also, as intended, become a really great educational tool on hybrid and soft shore approaches to shoreline protection and kind of incorporating ancillary benefits for ecology and cultural purposes into designing these projects. So the Coastal Zone Conference, it was a stop. During the centennial anniversary for the Migratory Bird Sanctuary, there was tours led. I've given tours to UVic students down at the site, as well as our partners bringing in different groups as well, including politicians and different regulators and provincial stakeholders. It's really become a focal point and has been really celebrating a really great win. We're working right now to create some signage and get it up. The other piece that happened is the Victoria International Marina was able to raise their pole carved by Wasonic Carver, and had a really wonderful ceremony where canoes were actually able to land on the beach, and with drumming and singing as the pole was installed. So a really fantastic project has kind of come to a completion, with just kind of ongoing communications rolling out. We've also been invited by the city to kind of do more of these projects within the harbor and within the area. So we're excited to kind of pursue some of those opportunities as they come. Next slide, please. Ian Bruce, now kind of in a role as senior advisor, still very involved, organized a really wonderful forage fish egg ID workshop in partnership with our DFO and our friends at DFO and the Ocean Sciences, and Moira. We had partners from all over the Sailor Sea and the West Coast who are doing this very same work of forage fish egg sampling come down and flesh out their ID skills in terms of IDing eggs and things that you can find in the sediments. She, basically provided a really wonderful workflow in terms of IDing these. And it was a very successful event, and fun was had by all. Congratulations, Ian, on a really wonderful event. This is in relation to the Coastal Forage Fish Network that we co-chair with Project Watershed, where we're trying to build capacity amongst all the other groups doing this kind of work, so that we're all kind of on the same page and can act as a single voice and body. Next slide, please. Before I get into the stats, I just want to recognize that all of these projects that you've seen, they all have one kind of common theme to them, and that's that they've been supported by the Pacific Salmon Foundation. They're a huge, important funder of ours. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. They're just there to catch us at all times and there to support our projects. They love what they love about us, I think, is that we have so many volunteers and we engage so many people in our projects, and the folks like you, our membership, our volunteers coming out and supporting these projects is our greatest strength as an organization. So I just want to highlight them and that foundation as well as you, and just really emphasize how important that is for us. It's our lifeblood. Some stats. It's been a really fantastic year, really busy year, a year of transition, a year of growth. And we've been able to get through it. And I think, again, thank you to our supporters for rallying around us as we've kind of had this exchange in leadership and also just, in really interesting times. It's interesting work that we do. It's exploratory sometimes, it's experimental, and it can have its peaks and valleys. And we appreciate our friends being there for us when it's the best of times. And we really appreciate our friends when we're kind of down. So thank you so much to everyone for just kind of being through us with this journey. Is exciting, and it has its rewards, as we all know. What we've been up to, a few steps for 2023. We've had work parties up the yin yang, 25 of them, stewardship groups, over 16, who have various levels of capacity, some of them just roaring along on their own, others who, we're really working with to try to figure out and find an identity and course with them. We've planted many grant applications, many of which successful, some not so much. But with basically being able to support this growth and activity that we're having, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. And volunteer hours. We are doing extremely well for volunteers. The annual, we're at 4580, which I think may be a new record. I'm not sure, but there we go. Compared to the last 2 years, at least, we have surpassed our volunteer hours. So again, thank you to our volunteers for coming out and being the backbone, being the labor for all of this hard work, and making us Peninsula Streams really look great. We can't thank you enough for all of that. I would like to do a plug for our legacy fund through the Victoria Foundation, and we'll be advertising this through our newsletter. Folks can make contributions to the Victoria Foundation and our legacy fund through them. And there's a number of different ways this can be done, through wills, through stocks, through life insurance, through just cash donations. And essentially what that is it's held in trust through the Victoria Foundation. They manages the fund with their very clever market and economic advisors, and they grow this fund. And we kind of take the cream from a very responsible level off of this, use the yield or the interest, and are able to use that towards our project. So as economic conditions may or may not get a little bumpy, we're really looking to build this fund, and we are asking you and your friends and your networks, share it amongst yourselves, promote it amongst yourselves, really help us bolster this so that we do become resilient as an organization in terms of our funding moving forward, and we can continue to do this really great work no matter what the economic climate is. And with that, next slide, please. Thank you very much for your support. Are there any questions? And for questions, I think as long as there's not too many, I'm happy if folks, maybe if we do the hand thing. I don't know, how do we see folks? Or can people just go ahead and ask questions? 8:30 right now. So if you'd like to stick around for questions and answers, we'll be here with you. And if you need to take off, obviously no offense taken. I'm sorry we didn't get you out of here in time. And if that wasn't clear, I think just go ahead and unmic yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
Not a question, Kyle. It's Ian Cameron. When my namesake, Mr. Bruce, said he was semi-retiring, I was a little nervous about what was going to happen. I'm not nervous anymore. No offense, Ian.
Well, thanks, Ian. I appreciate it. I was nervous too. I think we're all nervous, but yeah, everyone's really stepped up. And I think Ian has been a huge part of that success in terms of being here for us and helping advise myself and other staff, and being there for the challenges. And yes, we're very super happy to have Ian, especially in his new role. And yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. But thanks for the encouragement, Ian. It's much appreciated. Well, if there are no other questions, I mean, obviously feel free to email us, call us, whatever you like, and we're happy to chat. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. Again, thank you for all of your interest, support, hours, time. We just have a fantastic community here. We really can't say enough. The staff appreciate it. Thank you to the staff for all of your hard work. I'm absolutely blown away by just everything you've done. Incredible. And thank you all. Have a wonderful night, weekend, holiday. Yeah, cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.